Hello and welcome back to the Tao of Fred, where we explore myths and legends of all kinds in the never-ending quest for wisdom. And today I want to talk about the Ring of Polycrates. It's a great story that I was thinking about recently because if you watch my previous video recorded in Sicily, you'll know that I was recently in Sicily. And Sicily was formerly part of ancient Greece until it was conquered by the Romans around the first century or so. And so I had a lot of Greek mythology on my mind, and Greek mythology is a great resource for myths and legends of all kinds. And Mount Etna there in Sicily, that's the home of, they call it Mama Etna. It is the largest active volcano in Europe, and it's always got the little smoke coming out of the top. It's known to be the home of Hephaestus. In Roman mythology, he's known as Vulcan, and Medusa was lured down into the volcano by Hephaestus, and there's a whole story about that, which perhaps we'll get into another time. But my point is that Sicily is just uh, overflowing with Greek mythology. And so I was thinking about the Ring of Polycrates, which is a more unusual, seldom told story, but it's one that I really like. And so while I was there, I wanted to share it with my kids, and so I shared the story, and it was a fun experience. And so Polycrates looks like Polycrates, but it's pronounced Polycrates to the best of my knowledge, anyway. Rhymes with Socrates, more or less. Polycrates was a king in the 6th century BC in ancient Greece, the island of Samos, somewhere in the Greek islands. And he's a real king, a real guy, tyrant of the island of Samos. Um, Not sure how much of this story is true, but he was an actual king. But I believe this story is just apocryphal. But it's a good story, and it's a fun one. So it's a story of this king, this tyrant in Greece. There's some Greek salad to get us in the mood. And he was a very powerful king, and he was known to be a great warrior, a great general, and very successful in all of his undertakings. Successful in battle, successful at home, successful with his finances, successful with the ladies, successful in all of his undertakings. And he was accumulating quite a bit of wealth, quite a bit of land in his various conquests, and various other kings were either his friends or enemies, but many people wanted to be an ally because of his great fortunes in battle and elsewhere. And one of those other kings was this pharaoh, Amasis, Amasis II, who's also an actual real life figure from the 6th century BC. I think he's the 26th dynasty pharaoh of Egypt. If you want to brush up on your Egyptian history, you can Google him. And so they were building an alliance. And so Amasis wanted to be an ally with, form an alliance, sign a treaty with Polycrates. And so they were going to form this great, powerful alliance. And Amasis was familiar with all the great victories and conquests and the great fortunes of Polycrates. And so he thought this could be a very fortuitous alliance. And he was very interested in signing this treaty with him. But before he could sign the treaty, he was under the impression that the rumor had it, the widespread understanding about Polycrates was that he'd actually never lost a single battle, never lost anything. He was so victorious that he was 100% victorious, and so Amasis was actually somewhat concerned about this. So he told the king, um, it's very successful in battle. He told the king, if we're going to make a deal, um, I want to first see you lose something. I want you to give up something very important to you because I'm very I'm very nervous about your victories. You're a little bit too victorious. I see this as being a potentially great alliance, but there's something fishy about this. and so I want you to forfeit something. And so they hemmed and hawed for a bit, and they finally agreed that Polycrates would give up his great treasured emerald ring that he always wore. It's very special to him. I'm sure there's a long story behind it, which we won't get into. But the ring, they agreed that Polycrates would take this precious ring and throw it out into the sea, where it would sink to the bottom of the sea. And Polycrates thought, well, this is a rather strange way to approach the alliance, but if this is what you require, then that's fine. Seeing as how I've never lost anything in my life, I can afford to give up this ring, although it's quite precious to me. This is not the actual ring in the picture, by the way. This is just for reference. So the ring, and there's different versions of the story. So if you find a different version, see that it's not 100% the same as my version, don't write any hate mail, please. So he threw the ring out into the sea, and they celebrated, and they said, "Yes, this is a great day. I'm glad to see that you have forfeited the ring, and now I'm willing to sign an alliance with you." And so the Egyptian pharaoh and the Greek tyrant um, celebrated the next day with a great feast. They brought great harvest from the fields to the kitchen and prepared a great meal. And they brought all kinds of great fish from the sea and prepared that for the feast. And it was a spectacular occasion, as these occasions are often known to be. And they ate like kings, literally. And so there they were at the dinner table, and Polycrates was cutting open his great piece of fish in the middle of the feast. And as he cut open the fish, what did he find? But lo and behold, right there inside the fish was the emerald ring, which he had cast out into the sea the previous day. And he was quite shocked to see this. And it put a great big smile on his face because it reminded him of just how incredibly lucky and fortunate he was as a king and a general and a human. However, Amasis II, his his colleague from down south from Egypt, was not so happy about this, and he said, "No, this is a terrible sign. I renounce the treaty. I reject it." He picked up the treaty and tore it into pieces and said, "No, this alliance cannot be." And so that was it for that deal. And he got on his boat. Oh, that's on his boat. He got on his boat and sailed back to Egypt, and the treaty was over. And so I told this story to my kids, and my son says, "That's the end of the story. Seriously, it's not a very great story." And I said, "Yeah, well, it's a short story, and it's interesting, but the end of the story is only the beginning of the story, because the great question is why. Why was it so important to Amasis that Polycrates would lose something? And that is the great question. The importance of of knowing, understanding, comprehending the meaning of a loss, what it means to lose something. Um, so that's a big part of it for me, is just having the life experience, um, having a life experience to understand the ups and downs of life, and that sometimes you're on top and sometimes you're on the bottom, and that when you're on the bottom, someday you'll be back on top, and when you're on top, someday you'll be back on the bottom. And for someone like Polycrates, who had never experienced any loss in his life, he would not comprehend this universal principle of life, that what goes up must come down. And it is a very important principle in most religious traditions. This is the wheel of fortune. They might call it the wheel of samsara, the wheel of pleasure and pain, of joy and suffering, also known as the wheel of fortune. Um, it is a wheel that spins around in all of our lives, that brings joy, brings sorrow, brings victory, brings loss. And for those who have not, anyone who does not understand that concept, um, is doomed to inevitably face some great severe loss. And so, according to the story, Polycrates was eventually captured by an enemy and thrown in prison and then executed. And so he did experience the worst form of loss in that sense. And so it was apparently a wise choice on the part of Amasis not to not to continue with this alliance. And so it's a short story, but I find it to be pretty interesting because it's not something that we usually think about, the importance of loss, the importance of sorrow. Um, but it is something to be aware of. So next time you're suffering and sad and lamenting over some some great loss, whether it's romantic, financial, political, or otherwise, you can reflect on the fact that um, with great loss comes great wisdom. And when you're at the bottom, the only way you can go from there is up. And so the wheel will continue to spin. And when you see someone at the top, you know that they're not going to be there forever. And conversely, when you see someone in the depths of sadness and sorrow, be it a close friend or be it yourself, you can rest assured that that is not a permanent condition. And so this is just a great little pearl of wisdom that I wanted to share this week. And we'll end it as the Tao of Fred often does, at least this week. We'll end it with a passage from the Tao Te Ching, verse 22. It starts a little something like this, depending on your translation. If you want to become whole, let yourself be partial. If you want to become straight, let yourself be crooked. Food for thought. If you have a copy of the Tao Te Ching, or you can find it online, you can read the rest of this verse. It goes on like this, and um, it's definitely something worth thinking about. Embracing the opposites, the pairs of opposites. Um, with wholeness comes partiality. With straightness comes crookedness. With joy comes sorrow. With grief comes happiness, and so on and so on. So it's all about embracing the full spectrum of the human experience. So thanks for listening, and may all of your human experiences be satisfying and enriching. See you next week.